It was great to see Ding Liren back in action at the FIDE World Rapid Team Championship. He was playing for a team called Dragon Chilling, which I love the name, Dragon Chilling. So that was a team made up of Chinese players, and they'd been leading the event going to the final day, but they lost 2 matches. That meant that other teams had caught them up and even overtaken them. They had to win the final match to stand any kind of chance. Now, returning to Ding, he was on top board and he'd faced a tremendously strong field. Let me just give you a list of the opposition. So Niemann, Erigaisi, Pragnananda, Andreikin, Firuzja, Artemiev, Rapport. I mean, really tough. Now, he'd scored 5 out of 11. Now, back in the day when Ding was at his best, well, 5 out of 11 would be pretty average. But still, he's just returning to competition and had a really tough time. So actually, against that level, it wasn't a bad result. Anyway, going into this final round, he really had to be on his game, and a win would be very important for the team. They still had a chance of winning. So let's take a look at this game. He was playing against Zhao Jun, a Chinese grandmaster, and he had to go for it. Now, I mean, Ding normally would be a favourite. Zhao Jun's current rating is 25.96. But in Rapid, it's a different story. And we're not quite sure at the level Ding is playing at. So anyway, let's take a look at this game from the final round. Ding playing white, d4. All absolutely normal. And that pawn is planted in the middle. And knight d7. So this is a way of playing a kind of Queen's Gambit declined, but you leave the option to move this bishop somewhere other than e7. So it might go to any of these squares still, depending on how white plays. Ding went for bishop f4. Yeah, that's generally how he likes to play the Queen's Gambit declined. Black took on c4. And e3 and a6. So very typical of the Queen's Gambit. If white takes on c4, then black will play b5 and then bishop b7 and get in c5 very quickly, and black is absolutely fine. So it's imperative, if white wants the advantage, to play a4. Just preventing b5. Zhao played knight b6. I should say that Ding has a lot of experience with this line. And the knight was pushed, and knight d5. So hits these points, and then you have to watch out for bishop b4 and this pressure coming on c3. Ding simply took on c4 and allowed the exchange on f4. Now, if you remember the video I looked at yesterday, the game I looked at yesterday in the video, between Carlsen and Erigaisi, where Carlsen also allowed this exchange on f4, so double pawns, but white gets a lot of open files, the semi-open e file, and having this pawn on f4 is quite interesting because it can sometimes push to f5 and sometimes with d5. But yeah, it's the semi-open e file which is very interesting for white. And this is a known strategy going way back to when Alekhine was playing this in the 1920s actually. But clearly Ding wants to go for it. So bishop d6 and knight e5. So that's the other thing about having the pawn on f4 and pawn on d4. So white controls the outpost on e5, so it's very natural to put the knight on e5. And it looks at f7, so you can see that there is pressure building on these points. Black castled, of course, and Ding castled as well. And then bishop d7. So as usual, that queen's bishop is the problem piece for black in the queen's gambit. You've got to develop it somehow. But there are possibilities here. Queen f3. So it's very nice that white has this space now that the knight has moved to f3, and the queen is able to station itself very actively on this square, looking down here. I mean, looking at some key points in the position. b7, d5, f5. You never know, it might even swing over to h3 in some positions. So b7 is attacked, rook b8. White's coordination is absolutely superb, and you just have to compare with black's position. Black is behind the first three ranks, and the position of the queen is a problem. Now the position at the moment is sort of closed, but if the position were to open, then it's white that has these rooks on, very easily you can come to the D and E files. b5. So black is attempting to break out, and this is sensible. Ding exchanged on b6, so the threat to take, and b3, so that just protects the bishop. Very solid, means the rook doesn't do too much on b6. But still, black has a little bit of activity. Now, what black's best move here is to play bishop b5. I mean, I still like white's position very much, actually. They're in really nice space, but that gives black a chance. Sometimes you can exchange pieces just to ease the congestion, and, well, you never know, that queen might swing over to a8 at some moment, offering exchanges. But instead, Zhao played bishop b4. Well, again, he's looking to exchange pieces, and after bishop takes knight, then black will have greater control over d5. Right, time for me to have a drink. Cheers, and I'm in my lovely mug of tea. And time for you to have a think. How do you play as white in this position? What did Ding do next? Do you want to improve your chess? Get access to live masterclasses with yours truly? Then subscribe to patreon.com/PowerPlayChess, and for just $25 a month, you get a newsletter with a test game, calculation puzzles, a monthly opening survey, access to an archive with over 100 opening surveys. And you can join in live masterclasses exclusive to patrons, where you can ask me questions directly over Zoom. All for only $25 per month. Do subscribe to patreon.com/PowerPlayChess and join the club. This is the moment where white's position has reached its maximum, you could say. And unless you go forward, then black is going to get a foothold in the position. And yes, exchanging on c3 will certainly help black to get control over d5, for example. So white must be looking to strike here. So I would be looking at the pawn breaks, f5 or d5. Now, in this case, well, f5, if black is brave, you can just take that, and actually there's nothing really doing there. I mean, it looks very vulnerable, but actually black is okay. But the move is d5. Okay, I had been kind of highlighting this move earlier. It's very logical. The rook is opposite the queen. Of course, you need to look for this kind of move. And, well, Zhao now took on d5, and that's a mistake. But it's very difficult for black already. So the best move, this didn't happen, the best move is to take on c3. And then white's best continuation is to take on d7. And then just queen takes c3. So this is going to be captured. So e takes d5, rook takes d5. Now, black has not lost material. It's still even material. However, those three pawns, pawn on a6, c7, and the pawn on f7, they're all vulnerable. And white's pieces are so well coordinated. White has a very clear advantage here, but it's not yet over. But that is black's best. There's also sometimes the possibility to swing over to g5, you know, maybe f5 sometimes. But instead, after d5, e takes d5 was played. Then knight takes d5, and I'm afraid the bishop on b4 is just left dangling there, doing nothing. So knight takes, queen takes. Now you can see without the pawn on e6, then black is struggling here. You know, white has blasted the diagonal open, and with these pieces directed on f7, it is absolutely fatal. Not to mention the d file and this terrible pin, and the game is over. Black played rook d6, and then, well, I guess you had to see this move. Knight takes f7, and this is the end for black. Black resigned here. Obviously, rook takes knight, queen takes rook. And if rook takes queen, then knight takes queen, and the rook is pinned. So rook takes d5. White is the exchange and a pawn up with a completely winning position. So it was all over in 20 moves. I'm delighted for Ding that he played a really important part in that final match. And in fact, Dragon Chilling won the match convincingly 5-1. There was a pile-up at the end, but Dragon Chilling won on tiebreak. The captain of Dragon Chilling, Ni Hua, a strong player in his own right, said it was very tense. It reminded me of Arsenal versus Manchester City. Well, those of you who are Premier League football fans will understand that reference. We lost in the previous match, but this round we won. You can see that Ding started very slow, and then he became better and better. In the last round, we asked him to push, and he made it. He certainly did. I'm just going to go back looking at this game. You might recall a game between Ding and Aronian from the London Chess Classic in 2019 that went like this. So similar opening. And you can see, oh, look at that structure. Ding is very comfortable with this structure. Okay, it's a little bit different. This reminds me of Carlsen's game against Erigaisi. I mean, look at white's coordination. However, black has the two bishops. But I've actually looked at this game on the channel, but maybe I only gave it as a puzzle. I'm not sure. But this was absolutely brilliant. I should probably look at this in some detail. It really is worth it. But Ding won an absolutely brilliant game. It's not yet over, but that was Ding at his absolute best. He was actually rated over 2800 when he played this game and crushed Aronian. Brilliant game. So yeah, I'm delighted to see Ding back in the fray. I mentioned Carlsen against Erigaisi. Carlsen lost 4 games in a row. That game against Erigaisi was just the start of it. He lost 4 games in a row. Now, classical chess is one thing. You know, he struggled in Norway chess, but you know, rapid is usually his thing. So to lose 4 in a row is, well, he's never ever done that before, to my knowledge. So yeah, something's. I think we're seeing a turn with Carlsen. But let's see if he can bounce back in the blitz. He has certainly done that in the past. Let's see if he can do it again. There you go. Thanks for watching.